Theresa May insisted she will not rule out leaving the EU without a deal today as she laid out her Brexit Plan B. The Prime Minister said politicians had to be honest, that the only way to guarantee the UK will not crash out was passing her deal or revoking Article 50. She also dismissed calls for the Brexit day to be delayed and said she believed there was no majority in the Commons for a second referendum, insisting Remainers will have to think again if she is right. Instead, Mrs May stressed she was determined to win fresh concessions from the EU that can secure support for her deal from MPs. She also lashed Jeremy Corbyn for refusing to join cross-party Brexit talks, urging him to reconsider. The defiant message came as Mrs May unveiled her Brexit Plan B in a Commons statement. The PM has been scrambling to find a way through after her deal was humiliatingly crushed in the Commons last week. But in a statement to MPs this afternoon, Mrs May suggested, rather than focus on forging a cross-party consensus, she will attempt to bring Brexiteer rebels and the DUP back on side. Share this article. Share. Mrs May conceded there was widespread concern about the possibility of the UK leaving without a deal. There are those on both sides of the House who want the government to rule this out, she said. But we need to be honest with the British people about what that means. The right way to rule out no deal is for this House to approve a deal with the European Union. That is what this government is seeking to achieve. The only other guaranteed way to avoid a no-deal Brexit is to revoke Article 50, which would mean staying in the EU. The Premier said other politicians were calling for Article 50 to be extended beyond March so that there was longer for Parliament to debate how we should leave and what a deal should look like. This is not ruling out no deal, but simply deferring the point of decision, she warned. And the EU are very unlikely simply to agree to extend Article 50 without a plan for how we are going to approve a deal. So when people say rule out no deal, the consequences of what they are actually saying are that if we in Parliament can't approve a deal, we should revoke Article 50. Mrs May added, I believe this would go against the referendum result, and I do not believe that is a course of action that we should take or which this House should support. Mrs May condemned the idea of a second referendum, saying she did not believe the majority of MPs supported it, although she appeared to hint that if Parliament did vote in favour, she might accept the verdict. If I am right, then just as the government is having to think again about its approach going forwards, then so too do those members who believe this is the answer, she said. Pointing out that Mr Corbyn was the only Westminster Party leader to refuse her invitation to talks, Mrs May jibed, I regret that he has not chosen to take part so far. I hope he will reflect on that decision. Given the importance of this issue, we should all be prepared to work together to find a way forward. The Plan B approach has been branded one more heave by ministers, but it is far from clear that the EU is willing to give enough ground on the crucial Irish border backstop issue. Mrs May is tabling a neutral motion in the House that will be debated and voted on along with any amendments tabled by MPs on January 29. But Mr Corbyn has refused to hold discussions with the PM, and there has been little success for the government in trying to peel off opposition MPs. The deal was hammered by a record margin of 230 votes in the Commons last week. There have also been fears that forcing through a package with Labour support will split the Tories and cause an election. Mrs May is now pushing changes to the Northern Ireland backstop in the hope she can win round Tory Brexiteers and her allies in the DUP. The Daily Telegraph reported she was even considering trying to amend the Good Friday Agreement, although NO10 sources dismissed the idea as mad and a non-starter. Mrs May told the Commons this afternoon that she had not considered the move. She admitted there were fears the UK could be trapped permanently in the Irish border backstop and concerns about Northern Ireland being treated differently from the rest of the UK. So I will be talking further this week to colleagues including in the DUP to consider how we might meet our obligations to the people of Northern Ireland and Ireland in a way that can command the greatest possible support in the House, she said. However, she dodged when asked by Boris Johnson whether she would confirm that mean amending the withdrawal agreement. Irish Foreign Minister Simon Coveney was adamant over the weekend the backstop intended to ensure there is no hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic was an essential part of the withdrawal agreement. Arriving at an EU summit in Brussels this morning, German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas insisted the ball is in London. So far, unfortunately, the British Parliament has only said what it does not want. What we need now are concrete proposals from the British, he said. The ball is in London's court. There is not a lot of time left. In evidence of deepening Tory splits, Business Minister Richard Harrington today publicly urged the PM to rule out a no-deal Brexit. It's an absolute disaster for the country, and it's supported by a minority of people, he told BBC Radio 4's Today programme. Mr. Harrington urged Ms May to take a fresh approach. She should, in my view, say we are responsible people, we're going to do our duty to business, and we're going to rule out a no deal, because we want a great deal. He also said he was afraid of Jaguar and Mini closing if there was a no-deal Brexit. However, in a glimmer of hope for Mrs May, there are signs some Brexiteers could reluctantly back her deal amid concerns a cross-party grouping of MPs are plotting to impose a softer Brexit or stop it altogether. Graham Brady, who chairs the powerful Tory 1922 committee, said he thought Mrs May could get her Brexit deal past Conservative rebels if the Irish backstop can be sorted out. So much of the vote against was from people who simply cannot support a potentially permanent backstop. If that can be sorted out, then I think we might get that withdrawal agreement through, he told BBC Radio. He said it was in Ireland's interests to help Britain leave the EU with a deal, saying they would be far more hurt by a no-deal Brexit, that Britain as most of their trade comes through the UK. Writing in the Mail on Sunday, leading Tory Brexiteer Jacob Rees-Mogg said even Mrs May's deal would be better than not leaving at all. There was anger among pro-Leave MPs at moves to enable backbenchers to take control of the Commons business from the government and breach of normal conventions through a series of amendments to the neutral motion. One group, including senior Labour MP Yvette Cooper and Tory former Minister Nick Boles, is seeking to give time for a bill to suspend the Article 50 withdrawal process if there is no new deal with Brussels by the end of February. Another more radical amendment drawn up by former Attorney General Dominic Grieve would allow a motion by a minority of 300 MPs from at least 5 parties and including 10 Tories to be debated as the first item of Commons business the next day. Mr. Grieve said it would enable the Commons to stage a series of indicative votes on the various alternatives, such as a soft Norway-style deal or a second referendum to establish which could command a majority. He denied claims he was seeking to prevent Britain leaving the EU after International Trade Secretary Liam Fox accused pro-Remain MPs of trying to hijack the 2016 referendum vote. Mrs. May is expected to use her statement to explain how she intends to proceed in the run-up to the vote on January 29, rather than setting out a detailed Plan B. Amid a bitter blame game over who was responsible for the deadlock, Mr. Corbyn has been refusing to talk unless Mrs. May rules out a no-deal Brexit. He said, May's no-deal threat is empty and hugely expensive, wasting billions of pounds we should be spending on vital public services. It's a pointless and damaging attempt to appease a faction in her own party when she now needs to reach out to overcome this crisis. The SNP's Westminster leader Ian Blackford MP said, rather than listening to other options, the Prime Minister is instead closing them down, intent on cutting off any alternatives and leaving a false choice between her defeated dead deal and a disastrous no deal. It would be the height of irresponsibility and economic self-harm if Theresa May does not categorically rule out a no-deal Brexit today. Her attempt to run down the clock must be stopped.